Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are undertaking really a critical mission, pulling back the curtain on one of the most consequential yet maybe strategically opaque periods in modern conflict, mid-2000s.
That's right. We're talking about the strategic re-engineering by Al-Qaeda and the Taliban.
Exactly. From 2005 to 2009, these groups weren't just, surviving. They were actively executing a pretty sophisticated blueprint, one designed to dominate a nuclear-armed region. Our deep dive focuses on the how. How did they manage to transition from hunted fugitives to, well, architects of a regional war? And specifically, how they used Pakistan as their strategic core.
And this deep dive, it really goes into the source material that defines this whole era. We're unpacking some highly detailed intelligence briefings, investigative reports, materials that meticulously map out the militant game plan for reconstruction after 9/11.
So we're tracing the connections.
Deep connections, often uncomfortable ones, between the tribal areas, Pakistani political maneuvers, the surprising extent of military radicalization, and then the calculated expansion of conflict into India.
Right.
If you really want to understand the modern history of South Asian militancy, you absolutely have to grasp the why behind the chaos that just reshaped those 4 years, 2005 to 2009.
And what immediately jumps out of these sources, it should stagger you, the listener, is the initial timeline. We learned that by late 2006, the United States basically had to admit they were completely in the dark.
Completely in the dark.
About the true scale of this militant reconstruction. Just think about that for a second. Despite trillions spent to focus on the war on terror, the enemy had already essentially finished building their new functioning fortress right on the border of Afghanistan.
And Washington didn't really see the full picture until it was almost too late.
It's incredible. Let's unpack how a failure of intelligence really that epic could possibly happen.
Well, the time frame itself is the first clue, isn't it? Al-Qaeda, and you have to remember, driven by Zawahiri's strategic vision, they completed their reconstruction game plan remarkably quickly. We're talking by late 2005.
Late 2005. So this wasn't just like a loose gathering of people hiding out.
No, not at all. The sources document a very deliberate, organized effort. They were establishing functioning governance structures within Pakistan's federally administered tribal areas, FATA.
So, not just an informal safe haven. The sources say the key outcome, physically and politically, was establishing these two main militant territories. They even declared them formally, right?
Sure.
The Islamic State of North Waziristan and the Islamic State of South Waziristan.
Exactly.
What does creating an Islamic State actually mean in that context? Were they really governing?
It means they weren't just hiding, they were governing, in a sense. These areas immediately became powerful magnets. They drew in thousands of tribal youths, disaffected with the Pakistani state, Afghan veterans, various Pakistani jihadis, and critically seasoned foreign fighters.
So a real melting pot.
A dangerous one. Establishing these states meant formalized recruitment, training camps, even taxation systems, command and control structures, all completely outside Pakistani government control. It gave them a formal, almost state-like platform to launch operations from.
And these new structures, these quasi-states in the tribal areas, they were immediately weaponized, pointed west, right, into Afghanistan.
Directly. The strategic goal was clear. Use these safe havens to wage war directly into the southern Afghan provinces.
And how quickly did that start working for the Taliban?
Alarmingly fast. The sources show successful Taliban operations registering across a massive swath of Afghanistan. We're talking Kunar, Nangarhar, Khost, Paktika, Gardez, Uruzgan, Zabul, and Kandahar.
Wow.
This wasn't just scattered fighting. This represented a systematic pushback against the U.S.-backed government in Kabul.
The geographic gains, you mentioned, the sources are specific. By the end of 2006, the Taliban controlled 7 important districts in Kandahar alone. And Kandahar is, it's the spiritual heartland of the Taliban movement. Recapturing control there, that must have been a major psychological and operational victory.
It's huge. But maybe the single most successful strategic action, according to these sources, was their ability to take control of South Waziristan.
Why South Waziristan specifically? What made that so crucial?
Location, right. It provided this optimal, secure staging ground for launching operations directly into Afghanistan's adjoining Helmand province.
Helmand. Which, of course, became synonymous with just the bitterest, bloodiest fighting against Western forces, British, American contingents especially.
Right. The fighting there just drained coalition resources, morale, everything.
A real quagmire.
Exactly. And the realization of this failure, it seems, hit U.S. command sharply in late 2006. The internal assessment was stark. They basically concluded that southwest Afghanistan, specifically Helmand and large parts of Kandahar, had effectively slipped from their hands.
Slipped from their hands.
Yeah. The Taliban had successfully morphed from what was thought to be a defeated insurgency into a cohesive major regional threat. And the engine for that whole transformation, it was located entirely within Pakistan's sovereign territory.
And that realization, that must have set up the next major confrontation. So Washington finally wakes up to the reality, but it's late 2006, early 2007. This delayed realization meant the U.S. was essentially caught flat-footed by the scale of the Taliban's spring offensive in 2007.
They were completely unprepared.
And the clearest sign of Washington's fury wasn't some diplomatic cable, was it? It was Vice President Dick Cheney himself arriving in Islamabad, February 26, 2007.
Yeah, Cheney's visit. It was less about diplomatic niceties and much more about confrontation. He delivered an exceptionally blunt warning to General Musharraf.
What was the message?
Basically, severe consequences, economic, political, military, if Pakistan did not immediately commit to waging an all-out war on the militants nesting across the tribal areas. The gloves were well and truly off.
And he came with proof, right? The intelligence was specific. He confronted Musharraf about previous agreements.
He did. The sources confirm Pakistan had been giving money, sometimes framed as compensation for losses, other times basically payoffs directly to certain Taliban warlords.
Which sounds crazy. Why would Pakistan's military government fund the very people they were supposed to be fighting?
Well, it speaks to a deep, complicated history, doesn't it? Using certain militant groups as strategic assets, particularly against Indian influence in the region. Cheney's confrontation made that link explicit.
He named names.
Oh, yeah. He specifically accused Pakistan of having ongoing operational ties with certain Taliban factions, explicitly naming the powerful Haqqani network. The accusation was pretty clear. Pakistan was running a double game.
This really marks a critical moment then, a paradigm shift in Western thinking. For years, the story was, Pakistan's an unreliable ally, but maybe good intention, just struggling with fugitives. But Cheney's analysis solidified this new thesis.
And that thesis was brutally simple. The tribal areas were completely in the hands of Al-Qaeda. But crucially, they weren't just the sanctuary. They were the essential source of the Taliban's resurging strength in Afghanistan.
Right.
The implication was massive. Pakistan wasn't just hosting the problem. It was, in their view, at the core of the problem. Resolution, therefore, had to be political and military, and it had to start inside Pakistan itself.
And the immediate follow-up to this confrontation, it provided a pretty bloody punctuation mark, didn't it? The very next day, Cheney's at Bagram Air Base in Kabul.
And a devastating suicide attack kills 23 people, injures 20 more. Right there.
Unbelievable timing.
Precisely. And CIA reports quickly confirmed the planning for that high-profile attack linked directly back to North Waziristan. They specifically named Abu Layth al-Libi.
Al-Libi.
Yeah, an influential commander. He was maybe loosely associated at the time, but was rapidly becoming a central Al-Qaeda operational leader. He was named as the planner. It felt like a direct terrorist response aimed at the second most powerful man in America, showing the power the militants now projected from those Pakistani bases.
So the pressure clearly worked, on some level. Washington's next move was pushing for political restructuring in Pakistan. Musharraf agreed to hold national elections by the end of the year.
Which led to Washington and London brokering this monumental and, frankly, really controversial deal with the exiled opposition.
The deal between Musharraf and Benazir Bhutto?
That's the one. And its concrete result was the National Reconciliation Ordinance, the NRO, promulgated in October 2007. This NRO, it's a crucial piece of political jargon we need to unpack for you.
Because it wasn't just about letting politicians come home.
Not at all. It was a blanket amnesty.
An amnesty covering.
Whoa.
What exactly?
Everything. Charges of corruption, embezzlement, yes, but also, according to the sources, even murder and terrorism dating from January 1986 up to October 1999. Wiped clean. For Bhutto, her spouse Asif Ali Zardari, and thousands of others.
Thousands.
Yes. This allowed their return as free citizens to participate in politics.
So what was the calculation there? Why would the U.S. and U.K. push for something like that, wiping the slate clean on serious charges?
Well, this is the core political calculation they made, and it's key for you to grasp. Despite the, let's say, ethical cost, the U.S. and U.K. prioritized political stability. They wanted to create a civilian, moderate front against the militants. That took precedence over judicial purity.
They figured Musharraf needed help.
They calculated that Musharraf, who was increasingly isolated and unpopular, needed a political partner, even if that partner came with, well, intense baggage.
And the timing, the sources say, is telling. This whole complex political plot, hatched in early 2006, matures in April 2007.
The exact same month the U.S. was hammering Islamabad for an all-out war in Waziristan.
So it reveals this two-pronged U.S. strategy.
Absolutely. Military pressure against Waziristan, paired with political engineering in Islamabad, trying to reshape the battlefield and the government simultaneously. The irony, though, is that while the U.S. was doing all this high-level political engineering, pouring billions into trying to stabilize the security forces, Al-Qaeda was always, it seems, a critical step ahead on the ground.
How so?
The sources clearly show Al-Qaeda was just far more effective at making the right political and ideological connections within Pakistan's urban centers than the U.S. was at containing them.
Which leads directly to their next devastating strategic goal.
Which was implementing a plan to tear the war directly to Pakistan's major cities. This blueprint, it had been conceptualized earlier, but it was decisively implemented in 2007, right after the Taliban's 2006 spring offensive was, blunted somewhat.
So the thinking was, if the coalition forces locked down the mountains,
Al-Qaeda would shift the battleground to the capital itself, Islamabad, Rawalpindi, Lahore.
Who was behind this urban blueprint?
The intellectual director, according to the sources, was Sheikh Essa al-Misri, an Egyptian ideologue operating under Zawahiri's direction. His mission, starting back in 2003, was specifically political.
Political how?
To meet with various influential Islamic politicians, organizations, basically to forge a unified militant Islamic political front right in the country's urban areas. The goal was to strengthen support for Al-Qaeda, build a fifth column almost.
And the network he built, it spanned the whole ideological spectrum of Pakistani Islamism, didn't it? Ensuring maximum reach.
Absolutely. He's targeting Jamaat Islami, led by Qazi Hussain Ahmed, often seen as the South Asian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood, a huge political organization.
Right.
Then he successfully engages the Salafi Wahhabi camp, meeting with Hafiz Muhammad Saeed, the chief of Jamaat ud-Dawa, which is linked to Lashkar-e-Taiba.
Not okay.
Then he moves to the Deobandi school, which already supported the Taliban anyway, targeting Maulana Fazlur Rahman, chief of the JUI party. And finally, there's Dr. Israr Ahmed, a public academic calling for the revival of the Islamic Caliphate.
So a comprehensive outreach, covering all the bases.
Exactly. Ensuring Al-Qaeda gains support, or at least sympathetic ears, across different theological and political camps.
But the most immediate and violent response to al-Misri's efforts came from two brothers, didn't it? Maulana Abdul Aziz and Abdul Rashid Ghazi, the prayer leaders of Lal Masjid, the Red Mosque, right in Islamabad.
That's right. Lal Masjid became the immediate flashpoint for this whole urban strategy.
The audacity of that operation, as the sources describe it, is hard to overstate. It becomes an Al-Qaeda powerhouse.
Literally in the federal capital, directly facing the powerful ISI headquarters and the military's GHQ in Rawalpindi. It's incredible.
And the sources confirm these brothers were in regular contact with major Al-Qaeda leaders, Dahir Yildizev, Sheikh Essa.
Receiving explicit strategic directives, how to challenge the state, how to provoke a confrontation.
So the Musharraf administration knew they had a ticking time bomb. They had to act, but military intelligence kept advising caution. Why the hesitation?
It was deeply complicated, a major factor. Dozens of the daughters of high-ranking armed forces personnel, influential businessmen, top bureaucrats, they were students at the adjacent female seminary, Jamia Hafsa.
Ah, so any action.
Any action in that incredibly charged anti-American atmosphere risked internal military dissent, not to mention civilian casualties involving the children of the elite. A nightmare scenario for Musharraf.
But the militants were looking for a trigger, weren't they?
Exactly. As news of the Washington-brokered Musharraf-Bhutto deal hit the media, signaling a political shift, they absolutely detested Lal Masjid, deliberately escalated its protests.
And then the abduction.
The female brigade, Jamia Hafsa, abducted an alleged female pimp. They seized that moment of moral outrage to implement their pre-planned crisis action, designed specifically to force the military's hand.
Which it did. The military was eventually forced to respond. An operation, a siege against the mosque in July 2007.
And the aftermath was just a disaster for the state's narrative. Maulana Abdulaziz was famously arrested trying to sneak out disguised in a burqa.
A PR nightmare.
But the tragedy was deep. Abdur Rashid Ghazi, his mother, Abdulaziz's son, they were all killed, along with a number of male and female students.
So for you, the listener, the insight here is crucial. The state achieved a tactical victory. Sure, they took the mosque back, but strategically.
A colossal strategic defeat. The sources show that the massacre, as it was immediately framed, provided militants across the tribal belt and in the cities with this powerful unifying narrative against the regime. It became a potent new rallying cry for recruitment and jihad.
Okay, so Lal Masjid explodes, the state cracks down, but the militants get this huge propaganda victory. The political turmoil just intensified immediately after that, didn't it?
It did. The West's broker deal matured. Benazir Bhutto returned in October 2007. But Al-Qaeda was watching this transition with extreme strategic interest,
Leading to one of the most shocking events of the decade.
the assassination of Benazir Bhutto. And their motive, according to these sources, it was chillingly calculated.
What was the calculation?
Al-Qaeda foresaw a likely Democrat victory in the upcoming U.S. presidential election, meaning Barack Obama would soon be taking office. Their plan was to hit Bhutto during the transition phase, while the outgoing Bush administration was still, packing its bags.
Why then specifically?
They believed killing the leading moderate political figure at that precise moment would deliver a catastrophic blow to U.S. designs on Pakistan. It would plunge the country into total chaos before a new American administration could even establish its policy footing.
And they succeeded. Bhutto was assassinated. December 27, 2007, in Rawalpindi.
The country immediately erupted. The sources confirmed just total lawlessness, dozens of trains attacked, widespread destruction of public and private property nationwide. The chaos they engineered was meant to paralyze the state, and it largely worked.
And meanwhile, the military structure itself was undergoing its own internal earthquake. Musharraf shed his uniform in November 2007.
But the succession for the army chief position, the most powerful role in Pakistan, really caused major friction. General Kayani was the U.S. choice for COS, Chief of Army Staff.
That choice was highly irregular, wasn't it?
Absolutely. It broke decades of military tradition. A Director General of ISI had never before been made ASOAS. The U.S. picking Kayani signaled a clear break from Musharraf's older guard. They wanted officers they believed would be more cooperative in the fight against Al-Qaeda.
And Musharraf tried to stop it.
Our sources confirm he desperately tried. Twice, he attempted to remove Kayani by offering the COAS post to General Tariq Majid instead.
But Majid refused.
Refused on grounds of military discipline, apparently, which effectively ended Musharraf's leverage and just further deteriorated his position.
So all this political maneuvering, it wasn't happening in a vacuum. It meant the civilian and military leadership was distracted, vulnerable, exactly when the militant threat was peaking.
Precisely. The power vacuum eventually led to the elections, and a new alliance led by the Pakistan People's Party, the PPP, came to power in early 2008.
And Asif Zardari, Bhutto's spouse, became president.
A figure widely disliked, it has to be said, by both Washington and the Pakistani military establishment, mainly due to his long history of corruption allegations.
Right, and here's the tragic paradox we need to explore. Despite that public stigma of corruption meticulously detailed in investigations by the New York Times, the Washington Post's Zardari, as president and head of the governing coalition, ended up managing all the U.S.-sponsored economic development programs in the tribal areas.
It's quite something. It reveals this critical, deep-seated failure of the U.S. strategy, perhaps. The very mechanism designed to stabilize the region, this massive inflow of U.S. development funds, was being managed by a politically compromised figure.
So the money meant to combat the chaos
Was ironically flowing through systems that Al-Qaeda was simultaneously exploiting to grow its strength in those exact same tribal areas. It became this, self-defeating cycle of aid and instability.
Let's shift focus now, because it's not just about politics at the top. We need to look at the ideological corrosion happening within the Pakistani military itself. Pakistan was, for decades, fertile ground for radical ideology, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. You had the legacy of the Afghan jihad against the Soviets, General Zia-ul-Haq actively promoting Islamic values within society and the army, and then 5 years of the neighboring Taliban regime. It all built up.
So that decades-long history meant that when 9/11 forced Pakistan into this immediate alliance with America,
It created deep-seated antagonism and, frankly, empathy for Al-Qaeda and the Taliban within the military ranks. Our sources specifically note that many Pakistani soldiers, just unable to reconcile fighting fellow Muslims on behalf of the U.S., actually deserted the armed forces after 9/11.
we need to look at specific examples of this radicalization, because this is where the strategy moves from just ideology to applied military science. We find men like Captain Karam, a former UN peacekeeper, no less.
And Major Haroon, both retired from the Pakistan Army in 2003 and immediately joined Lashkar-e-Taiba Lati.
Highly professional soldiers just switching sides.
And it went further. Captain Khurram and another figure, Major Abdur Rahman, actually took up arms and fought British troops in Helmand province, Afghanistan. Khurram died fighting there in 2007.
So this wasn't passive sympathy anymore. This was professional, state-trained expertise turning directly against its former allies.
Exactly. And Major Haroon, a veteran of the Kargil conflict with India, he becomes absolutely central to the militant strategic blueprint. He openly cited what he called the cowardice of Pakistani officers in the face of political pressure. He was convinced the Pakistan army was just too politically constrained to fight a major, decisive battle.
So what did he do?
He traveled to North Waziristan, and he presented two comprehensive global models of insurgency directly to senior Al-Qaeda commanders.
This is fascinating. Fusing ideology with actual military theory. What models did he propose?
He laid out the strategies of the Vietnam guerrillas, how they operated against the overwhelming military might of the United States. And secondly, the Tamil Tigers in Sri Lanka.
The Tamil Tigers. They were known for naval and urban sabotage tactics. How do you apply that model to the mountains of Waziristan?
Well, that required a fundamental shift in perception. The lesson from the Tamil Tigers wasn't about boats, you see. It was about systemic disruption. Strategic targeting of national infrastructure, high-value political targets, including assassinations, forcing a military response that overstretches the enemy.
Ah, I see.
So for Al-Qaeda, this meant moving beyond simple border raids. It meant focusing on military logistics and psychological warfare within Pakistan itself. The goal was to drastically widen the Taliban's war perspectives, make them think bigger.
And Haroon immediately put this theory into practice.
Right away. With a comprehensive military plan aimed squarely at crippling the NATO war effort in Afghanistan, the plan severed the NATO supply line. Those containers running all the way from the port of Karachi up into Afghanistan.
How significant was that supply line?
Absolutely vital. Look at the logistics. 80% of all crucial supplies for coalition forces went through the Khyber Agency via Pakistan's tribal area. The remaining 20% used the Chaman-Kandahar route further south.
It's a choking man.
Haroon's plan, scheduled to begin in January 2008, was designed to essentially choke the coalition forces, stop their fuel, their food, their ammo, operationalizing the lessons from Vietnam, target the enemy's logistical tail.
But the strategy was twofold, wasn't it? It wasn't just operational.
No. The ultimate objective for Haroon was psychological and political. He wanted to, as the sources put it, jolt the conscience of the Pakistan army, force it to sever all ties with the U.S. He decided to use terror as a mechanism of political persuasion aimed at his former colleagues.
Ow.
He established a targeted kill list, drew up names of senior officers involved in anti-terror activities, decided to make horrible examples of them to deter others.
And assassinations followed?
Yes. A series of assassinations and murders, including that of retired Major General Faisal Alvi. And the insight our sources provide here is clear. Killing a retired official wasn't random. It was a deliberate psychological message to serving officers.
What was the message?
That their loyalty to the U.S. alliance would follow them home. They couldn't escape it, even after retirement. A very chilling tactic.
So choking NATO supplies was the operational goal. But Major Haroon's ultimate strategic vision, the grand design, it was geopolitical, wasn't it? Provoking a full-scale regional war.
That was the endgame. And it seemed necessary because the U.S. was actively promoting a role for India in Afghanistan, trying to use India as a counterweight to Pakistan, playing on that deep existing rivalry.
So Haroon and his supreme commander, Mohammad Ilyas Kashmiri, they work on a counter-strategy starting in 2007. And the fundamental ideological engine driving this, it was a long-term, almost messianic concept, Ghazwa-e-Hind.
Yes, let's pause there because Ghazwa-e-Hind is absolutely crucial to understanding the strategic depth here. It's not just about a battle, is it? It's an apocalyptic vision.
Explain that.
Ghazwa-e-Hind refers to a prophesied, final, large-scale battle against non-Muslims in India. It's referenced in certain Islamic eschatologies and times literature. For Kashmiri and Haroon, this concept transformed India from just a regional rival into the central, long-term theater of operations, the promised end-of-times war.
So this elevated their regional strategy.
To a global ideological imperative for Al-Qaeda. It gave their actions in India a profound religious justification in their eyes.
With that ideological mandate, the first phase of their plan was staggering. Simple and devastating. Conduct a 9/11 type event in India.
And Haroon assessed, probably correctly, that an attack on that scale would absolutely force India to declare war on Pakistan.
What was the strategic logic behind wanting that war?
Brilliant from their perspective. Once India mobilized for war, the Pakistan army would be instantly forced to pull its crucial troops off the Western Front where they were fighting Al-Qaeda and the Taliban in Waziristan to defend the eastern border against India.
So the militants get breathing room.
An immediate strategic reprieve, operational space, and potentially renewed internal support from anti-Indian elements within the Pakistani establishment who might see them as allies against India.
Who did Haroon assign to lead this operation?
Major Abdul Rahman. His close aide, described in the sources as a living encyclopedia on Indian affairs. Rahman was already aware that the ISI had decided, in late 2007, to launch a new wave of jihadist terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir using Lati. But that was the routine low-level proxy war stuff.
Right, the usual tactics.
But the physical terrain had already forced a strategic shift for Lati. The intense fencing India had put up along the line of control, the LOC, made those traditional infiltration routes into J&K really difficult and costly.
So Lati had to adapt.
They were forced to start using the deserted coastal area of Thada, down in Sindh province, to move their jihadists into India by sea. And this geographic shift gave Haroon the perfect opportunity to hijack the operation for his much larger goal.
How did he manipulate Lati?
He subtly stepped in, met with the Lati commander Abu Hamza, advised him forcefully not to waste resources on what Haroon dismissed as futile exercises in Kashmir. Instead, Major Rahman provided highly detailed maps and photographs.
Of targets in Mumbai.
Crucial targets in Mumbai, yes. Specifically focusing on areas where white foreigners lived and frequented. Nariman House, the Chabad Center, and the iconic Taj Mahal Hotel.
This was the pivot. From localized proxy war to global terrorism designed to trigger a state-level conflict.
Absolutely. Haroon ensured the plan was meticulous. Travel on a Pakistani boat, capture an Indian trawler out in international waters to mask their approach, then launch a massive synchronized operation, designed specifically to compel a military confrontation between the two nuclear states.
And Abu Hamza bought it.
He forwarded the plan up to the Lati commander-in-chief, Zakir Rahman Lakhvi. Lakhvi spent 2 months rigorously selecting and training the 10 young terrorists to execute Haroon's devastating design.
The 26/11 attacks, November 2008, they stunned the world.
And critically, the captured terrorist, Ajmal Kasab, his confession immediately linked the training directly back to Pakistan. There was no ambiguity.
The immediate reaction in Delhi was exactly what the militants had predicted, wasn't it?
Exactly. India geared up for a limited war. Sources confirmed preparatory measures were underway for potential airstrikes on Lati camps in Muzaffarabad, their headquarters near Muridke.
And instantly, the militants in Pakistan responded.
Mullah Fazlullah in Swat, Batullah Masood in Waziristan. The leaders of the main terror factions, they announced publicly and proudly that they would fight alongside the Pakistan armed forces if India attacked.
A united front against India.
This strategic alignment was even confirmed at the highest levels. The Director General of the ISI at the time, Eltigen Ahmad Shuja Pasha, actually confirmed this chilling understanding in a briefing. The plan to use 2611 to buy strategic breathing room for Al-Qaeda and the Taliban had almost resulted in a catastrophic regional war. It was that close.
So the brink of war. India's mobilized, Pakistan's military and militants are potentially aligning. This is the moment where we have to recognize the power of targeted diplomatic intervention, right?
Absolutely. The stage was absolutely set for war, but Washington intervened decisively. They put their foot down, sent high-level officials rushing to both New Delhi and Islamabad.
With what message?
One blunt message. Any war between the two nuclear powers would only and exclusively benefit the terrorists. Full stop.
And Washington gave assurances.
Assured India that Pakistan would cooperate fully in the investigation and arrest those responsible for 2611. That intervention, that pressure, prevented open hostilities. And critically, it thwarted Kashmiri and Haroon's primary war provocation plan. The effort to basically turn the West Front into the East Front failed, thanks to that intervention.
But the militant machine didn't just stop, did it?
Not at all. Haroon immediately advised Rahman to shift the focus, move towards long-term sabotage and high-value hits, specifically for the 313 Brigade, which was led by Ilyas Kashmiri.
Kashmiri, right. He'd impressed Al-Qaeda leaders with his comprehensive battle plan rooted in that Ghazwa-e-Hind concept.
Requiring the permanent establishment of a war theater in India, it wasn't just about cross-border raids anymore.
So Rahman journeyed back to India, focusing on intelligence gathering.
Yes. Acquiring sensitive intelligence for the 313 Brigade's next wave of attacks. And the target list they developed, it just demonstrates the escalating ambition and the sheer danger involved.
What kind of targets are we talking about now?
India's most sensitive installations, nuclear research laboratories in Mumbai and Hyderabad, the National Defense College, the NDC in Delhi, which trains India's highest military and political strategists, and the parliament building itself.
This was a plan to cripple India's strategic capacity at every level: military, scientific, political.
Exactly, and the sources reveal the contingency planning was equally meticulous. If they couldn't hit the National Defense College during the day, Rahman's operatives were instructed to attack the Indian parliament instead. It shows this relentless focus on high-impact, politically destabilizing targets, whatever caused the most chaos.
What happened to Rahman?
Eventually, he was identified and arrested by the ISI in July 2009. It happened after a lower-ranking 313 Brigade militant was picked up and presumably talked.
So he was caught.
Yes, but incredibly, Rahman was released fairly quickly. The justification: he hadn't committed any terrorist act in Pakistan.
That's quite something.
It's another deep insight into the internal conflicts, the contradictions within the Pakistani state and its relationship with specific militants, isn't it?
So Rahman is released, but before he could execute these massive sabotage operations in India,
Critical information was leaked, specifically, it seems, to the FBI. And that information led directly to the uncovering of the Chicago conspiracy in October 2009.
David Headley and Dahawar Rana.
Arrested in Chicago. And their case revealed an astonishing degree of global planning. They weren't just plotting regional attacks anymore. The sources confirmed their plans included hitting the National Defense College, Indian nuclear facilities, and the Danish newspaper Jyllands-Posten.
The newspaper that published the controversial cartoons of Prophet Muhammad.
Exactly. So this connects Haroon's regional military strategy directly to Al-Qaeda's global grievance list. It shows how intertwined it all became.
And the court documents, the affidavit from that case, it confirms the essential roles of Major Haroon and Abdul Rahman in recruitment, reconnaissance, orientation for these international plots.
The professionalization of terror led by these defected military officers had truly gone global. It wasn't just a regional problem anymore.
Now, what about Haroon himself? He was eventually captured too, right?
Yes, Haroon was finally arrested in February 2009 in Islamabad. Oddly enough, while trying to abduct a member of the Qadiani sect, a minority group often persecuted in Pakistan, but not really a strategic target in the way we've been discussing.
Strange. And just a week later, in March 2009, gunmen attacked the Sri Lankan cricket team bus in Lahore.
That attack, the pattern of it, provides one final example of their sophisticated psychological warfare, perhaps. The gunmen primarily targeted the escorting police, not the cricketers themselves initially. Then they tried to hijack the bus, but the driver managed to prevent it with quick thinking.
What was the suspected motive?
The ISI later claimed this attack was carried out by Haroon-trained militants, and the intention: to capture the cricketers, take them hostage.
Hostages to be exchanged.
For their captured commander, Haroon, a tactical high-stakes trade attempt engineered by his loyalists even after his arrest.
So looking back, what was the ultimate legacy of someone like Ilyas Kashmiri?
Profound, really. His goal was clear: create a permanent theater of war in India. Revitalize that old ISI-built jihadi network, which had become somewhat marginalized under intense U.S. pressure post-9/11.
And did he succeed, even partially?
Well, the 2010 Poon bomb blast, later confirmed to be carried out by Al-Qaeda's 313 Brigade under Kashmiri's direction, showed that this long-term strategy remained active even after the major players like Haroon were off the board.
And the crucial final connection the sources provide: it's that Al-Qaeda didn't invent this comprehensive strategy from scratch, did they?
No, they refurbished it. They essentially updated a 30-year-old ISI plan, a plan that involved a vast network, Hujai, JI, Muslim Brotherhood affiliates, Sufi networks that had constructed this huge theater of war stretching from Central Asia all the way to Bangladesh, originally designed, remember, to defeat the Soviet Union in Afghanistan.
So Al-Qaeda just repurposed that old infrastructure.
Took that expansive, multi-ethnic, pan-regional operational map and updated it, rebranded it for the greater theaters of war of Khorasan and Ghazwa Hind. They utilized the infrastructure that the state itself had put in place over decades and then weaponized it against the state, or at least against state policy, when alignments shifted after 9/11. It's a complex, interwoven story. #tag outro.
So what we've really seen in this deep dive is just how calculated this all was. A clear military and political strategy. And the internal, often messy politics of Pakistan, the NRO, the succession battles, Musharraf struggles, They became intrinsically linked to the strategic, calculated decisions of global militant groups like Al-Qaeda and the Taliban.
Absolutely. The chaos and political division in Islamabad. It wasn't just a distraction for the terrorists. It was, in many ways, the essential fuel for their operational strength in Waziristan and beyond. They thrived on that instability.
So the key takeaway here for you, the listener, is really understanding the sheer sophistication of this adversary. These weren't just random thugs.
Not at all. The sources reveal this deep, interconnected strategy, focused less on holding tiny bits of territory and more on leveraging regional rivalries, internal weaknesses, viewing the state itself as a resource to be hijacked or destroyed when useful.
And figures like Major Haroon and Ilyas Kashmiri, they showed how professional, radicalized military expertise could pivot a regional conflict into potentially an existential crisis for two nuclear powers.
Yeah.
All through deliberate, calculated political provocation.
It really forces us to look past the typical, often simplistic narratives of terrorism. We need to recognize these were groups using sophisticated professional statecraft, dark statecraft, perhaps to achieve their goals.
Yeah, critical thinking demands we see that complexity.
Oh, indeed.
Now, the timely intervention of Washington, as we discussed, it famously prevented an open war between India and Pakistan in 2008 after the Mumbai attacks. It forced both nations back from the brink.
A crucial intervention.
Given the documented strategic vision of someone like Kashmiri aiming for that end-of-times battle through Ghazwa Hind, and the documented plans to attack nuclear facilities, what potential catastrophic long-term impact did that single restrained diplomatic act actually have on the geopolitical future of South Asia? Preventing that war was vital, but did it just postpone a reckoning or alter the trajectory entirely? That's the question that really lingers, doesn't it? Long after the immediate chaos of 2009 subsided. Something for you to think about.